Quick test. How many quotes did you send out last week? Now, how many of those got a second message after you hit the send button? If you don't know, you're not alone, but you are leaking cash. Because here's the thing. Most service businesses, they don't lose the job at the quote. The job is typically lost after the quote. When the estimate goes quiet, no one owns the next step, and that customer's urgency silently fades into insignificance. In the next few minutes, I'm going to show you the 3 places where follow-up tends to break, and the simple follow-up path that fixes it without sounding desperate. And by the end, you'll be able to spot exactly where your revenue is silently slipping away, starting today, even if your pricing is perfect. If you run any kind of a service business, whether it's an HVAC, general contractor, auto repair, you've heard something along the lines of, we sent the quote out, we never heard back, they must not be interested anymore. Here's the part that stings. Most of the time, they didn't reject you, they drifted. Let's be real here. Life gets busy. They got busy. Life happens. Something with the kids, something with the house, something with work. The decision got delayed. The spouse wasn't home at the time you came by to provide the estimate. Or maybe the problem just didn't feel urgent enough that particular day. And while you're telling yourself that, hey, they're just not a buyer, what's actually happening is far simpler. Your follow-up is leaving the customer alone at the exact moment when they need the most clarity. Silence doesn't mean no. Silence usually means that no one guided the next step. Missed follow-up is silent revenue loss. Most operators tend to blame price because it's the easiest thing to point to. They say, hey, if we were cheaper, we would have won that bid. Sometimes, sure, price matters, absolutely. But if your quotes are going dark, price is not the first thing to be fixing. Because here's the thing. The real reason most estimates die is actually very boring. There's no process, there's no timing, there's no ownership. A quote gets sent out and there is 0 next step action attached to it. There's never any, hey, here's what happens next, or you know what, I'll follow up with you next week on Tuesday. There's never a, hey, reply back with these 2 details so we can get you locked in. So the customer does what any human would do when there's no next step. They postpone, they delay. And you know what that postponing looks exactly like? Ghosting. If your follow-up depends on memory, urgency, or good intentions, it's going to fail at the worst possible time. And that is when you're slammed, when the phones are ringing off the hook, when you're on a job site, when you're exhausted. Key thing to remember here, memory is not a follow-up system because a system works even when you're busy. Here's a good way to think about it. You don't have a sales problem after the quote's been shipped. You have a handoff problem. The moment that the estimate is sent, the customer is deciding in the background. And if no one is guiding that decision, their brain naturally defaults to the safest decision, and that is do nothing. And here's the thing. Doing nothing doesn't feel like rejecting. It feels like, I'll do this later, which is exactly why follow-up needs to be automatic, not emotional. I'm going to show you right now where follow-up breaks in almost every single service business. Breakdown number 1. The estimate gets sent, and that's the end of the story. No next action is defined. It's pretty much, here you go, and then you sit and you hope and you pray. Breakdown number 2. No one clearly owns the next touch point or the next step. Office thinks that sales will handle it. Sales thinks that the office will handle it. Or you as the owner assumes, well, someone will follow up, right? Breakdown number 3. The timing is random. Sometimes you follow up the exact same day because you're thinking about it. Sometimes you wait 2 weeks because, let's be real, you forgot about it. That randomness right there is what kills your close rate. Here's a typical timeline. Day 1. You do the walkthrough, the customer's engaged, you send the quote. Day 2, nothing. You're busy, they're busy. Day 4, the customer starts adjusting mentally. The urgency, it's just not there. Day 7, another company shows up or they decide to wait until next month. Day 10, you just remembered and now you got to send that just following up message. Now it feels late, it feels needy, and you feel like you're behind and you're chasing. And the customer, now they feel pressure when they should be feeling support. And here's what makes this absolutely brutal. Customers aren't sitting there thinking, I'm ignoring them. They're thinking, I'll handle that later. And later, well, that's where jobs go to die. Because in most service work, urgency is a window. That leak, it's annoying today, but it's tolerable next week. The yard needs work, yeah, can wait. That remodel, yeah, sure, it's exciting until you see a different idea and design on Instagram. So if you don't guide that next step inside of the window, that window closes. And look, this isn't a people problem. It's a systems problem. If no one in your organization owns the follow-up, nobody does it. So why does this feel personal? Let me explain why follow-up failures actually mess with your head. Cold leads or whatever, you expect a number of them are going to ignore you regardless. But a quote going dark, that hits differently, doesn't it? And that's because the work already happened. You paid for the lead. You took the call. You drove out to see them. You did the walkthrough. You built out the estimate for them. The customer nodded. They asked questions. They looked interested. And then nothing. And that gap between effort and outcome is where cash flow anxiety lives, because it makes you question everything. Was I unclear? Did I come off weird? Was my price stupid? And when you're in that headspace, you make even worse decisions. You start discounting everything. You overpromise. You take bad fit jobs just so you can feel busy. Meanwhile, the real issue, it's usually structural. A missing step in the process, a missing owner, a missing calendar trigger. Lost follow-up feels personal because it should have been easy. But easy only happens once it's been designed. When operators notice jobs slipping away, they typically react in one of three predictable ways. One, they panic and they push harder on new leads. You know what I'm talking about. More ads, more calls, more, hey, we just need volume right now. Two, they pressure their teams verbally. Guys, we have to follow up more. No clarity, just stress. Or three, they start chasing manually. In other words, they text customers at night. They check in repeatedly. They over-explain things. All three of them create noise. None of them actually fix the root issue. And that is that there's no clear follow-up path after the initial estimate has been sent. Look, pressure is not a process. Activity is not a process. Activity is not a system. And just checking in, that's one of the worst strategies ever. Here's what actually fixes this without sounding desperate. You don't need to follow up more aggressively. You need to follow up more intentionally. That means that every single estimate has a defined path. And a path has 4 parts: an owner, a schedule, a purpose, and a stop rule. First, assign an owner. One person in your organization is responsible for the next touch every single time. Not the office, not sales, a name, a person. Second, set a schedule before you send the estimate. Not I'll follow up sometime, an actual cadence. Here's a simple baseline that works in just about every single service business out there. Touch 1, same day or next day. Purpose, confirm receipt, and make the next step effortless. Not checking in, more like, hey, I wanted to make sure that you actually got the estimate. If you want, I can walk you through the options in about 2 minutes. Are you free later today or would tomorrow be better? Touch 2, 2 to 3 days later. Purpose, add context that will help them make a decision. And this is where you answer those unspoken questions like, what's included? What's the timeline? What will happen next? What happens if we wait? An example, you might say, well, most people ask about timing. Well, if we start this week, we should be able to wrap up by this date. If we start later, then the schedule shifts. Would you like me to hold a slot for you? Touch 3, 5 to 7 days later. Purpose, give a clean decision point and remove any pressure. You're not begging here. You're closing the loop like a pro. Mrs. Smith, it's totally okay if now is not the right time. Should I keep this open? Close it out for now. That last line, it's magic because it gives them relief. And when people feel relief, they tend to respond. Now, 2 rules that make this work. Rule 1, every single touch should contain one helpful piece of context. Something like a photo from the walkthrough, a scheduling note, a permit requirement, perhaps a warranty detail, or what to expect next. Something that's going to make the customer feel taken care of. Rule number 2, never ask vague questions. When you ask a customer something like, any thoughts? That just invites delay. Instead, ask for a decision or a preference. Do you want option A or option B? Do you want to start on Tuesday or Thursday? Do you want to move forward this week or would you prefer to revisit this next month? And I'm going to add in a bonus 3rd rule. Make each touch feel like service. Helpful, specific, oriented around the customer's decisions, not your needs. Good follow-up doesn't feel like selling. It feels like support. And look, if after all of this, they still simply don't respond, then just stop. Not forever, but until some kind of a trigger happens. Whether that's opening the estimate again, they call back, they reply to one of the emails finally, or you hit a seasonal schedule change. Because endless just checking in trains most people to dread follow-up. A clear stop rule is going to keep your team consistent and keep your brand sparkling and shining. Here's a great one-liner definition. Good follow-up is a customer experience that happens after the quote. Good follow-up feels like service, not selling. Now, here's where AI can actually help quietly, not by spamming customers, not by replacing humans, but by protecting the system when humans get busy. AI can very easily flag every estimate that went out without a booked next step. It can remind the owner of that follow-up touch point when it's due. It can surface quotes going dark before they turn into "we lost it." The goal here isn't volume, it's consistency. Because consistency, that's what recovers lost revenue. And consistency beats charisma every single time. Small service businesses run follow-up on good intentions. They say, someone will remember, someone will get back to them, someone will get to it. Operators don't do that. Operators run follow-up like a production line. Clear ownership, clear cadence, clear purpose. And here's the wild part. That one difference can raise your closing rate without changing your pricing, your marketing, or your sales skills. It's not hype, it's math. If clarity had a dollar value, follow-up discipline would be absolutely priceless. So let's put some numbers on it, shall we? Let's say you send out 20 estimates a month at an average $3,000 per estimate. That's $60,000 of potential work just sitting in limbo, waiting. If you close 25%, you book about $15,000 right there. Now imagine you don't change your leads, your marketing, or your prices. You only fix follow-up, and your closing rate goes from 25% to 30%. Now, instead of $15,000, you got $21,000. Same effort, same number of quotes, but an extra $6,000 that month. Most businesses will go hunt that $6,000 with ads. Operators, on the other hand, recover it with process. If this hits a little too close to home, I made something for you. It's called the Follow-Up Failure Map. It's a quick diagnostic PDF that you can review in about 20 minutes. It shows you exactly why estimates go dark and what to fix first. Inside of it, you'll see the most common failure points after a quote is sent. You'll map the life of an estimate from sent to closed to lost, so you can spot the exact step where the momentum dies. There's a responsibility check that forces clarity. Who owns the next touch? Who owns the scheduling? Who owns the closeout? There's a timing and touch point guide included as well, so your follow-up stops being random and starts being reliable and intentional. There's also a prioritization page. That way, you can pick the one change that recovers the most revenue with the least amount of effort. Here's the promise. If you implement just one fix from this PDF, you should feel the difference in your pipeline within a few weeks, because you'll stop letting warm estimates evaporate into nothing. If you want it, go ahead and click the link in the description and download your follow-up failure map. And if you want more simple systems like this that reduce cash flow anxiety, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. And if you want to help other owners stop losing money after the quote is sent, go ahead and hit that like button as well.